You think Common Ground is worth a buck? Consider leaving a tip at lptv.org. Lakeland Public Television presents Common Ground, brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.
I'm Pam Brunfelt. I'm a historian and I teach at Vermilion Community College in Ely, Minnesota. One day I was waiting for a meeting to start and somebody at the table said, "We had a communist mayor." And I perked up, having grown up on the Mesabi Iron Range where communists were not at all uncommon. I thought, boy, this is really interesting. I've never heard of this. And I asked the people who it was, and they said, "We don't remember." And so I took that little bit of information in my brain and I thought, I've got to do something with this someday. And I went back to grad school and decided to do some research on the story. And I found out it was a young man. His name was Emil C. Nygard when he lived in Crosby. He eventually took the name Karl Nygard. He ran for public office in 1930, lost, and then ran again in 1931 and almost won. He lost by about 32 votes. And after a recount in which he still lost, he continued his Communist Party activities. 1932 was the worst year for the Depression on the Cuyuna Iron Range. It was the worst year in general for the iron mining industry in Minnesota. In 1929, there had been a record shipment year. There had been more tonnage shipped from the three ranges than at any other time. And 3 years later, the bottom fell out. The Mesabi, the Cuyuna, and the Vermilion shipped just 2 million tons of ore that year. That was about 1883 levels. So it was terrible. And then the banks closed in 1930, late 1932. So these miners who were unemployed and had been living on their savings in the bank now had nothing left. It was gone. So it was a desperate time for all of them. It was before, of course, the New Deal begins to put money into people's pockets. And so I think one of the reasons he wins in 1932 is because people had lost enough hope that they were willing to try anything.
I don't think it was like a radicalization to the left, as many historians might have looked at it in earlier decades. It's really looking at a social group, a collection of immigrant peoples that were struggling, that businesses weren't satisfying all their needs. Their employers in the mines were clearly not supplying everything that they needed right at the height of the Great Depression. And so they're reaching out to whatever organization seems to be saying, we will do something to help you, we will support you. And at that point, that included the Socialist Party, the International Workers of the World, the IWW, organizations like that. And while, yes, if you went through their rhetoric, it seems sort of extreme, in between there are the things I think that many of the people were attracted to, which were things about supporting each other, social wealth, assistance, and well-being. It wasn't all about trying to radically rewrite the society. It also was trying to support and help people. And that's really, I think, the message people were attracted to, both in the larger party and in Karl's own messages.
I think there are historians who believe his election is a historical anomaly because he ran against two mainstream candidates. I believed that when I first started doing the story, but I no longer believe that because two other men who ran on what they called the workers' ticket that year also won with about equivalent numbers of votes to Karl Nygard. That's no accident. Now, he's 23 years old. He's got a fiery temper, and I don't know about you, but there aren't very many 23-year-old men who aren't going to puff up a bit, get a bit egotistical when they make national history. And so he tended to say things that he probably shouldn't have. He boasted about things that were not true. And so by the end of the year, the people of Crosby had had enough, and they ousted him in a massive landslide. He ran again in 1934. Again, he was swamped in a landslide, and he never ran for office again. It's a fascinating story because it was not about overthrowing the United States government. It wasn't about revolution of any kind. All it was a struggle for economic justice in a mining town. And he just took up the banner of communism because Communists were talking about the issues that mattered to workers: unemployment compensation, workmen's compensation, fair wages and fair laws, especially working hours. And they wanted to be able to join a union, and neither the Democratic or the Republican Party was talking about it. So they joined the Communist Party, or became interested in the Communist Party, because no one else was dealing with their issues. And so it's a story that matters because it's the story of ordinary people fighting against their own circumstances.
I was just looking through this box of pictures, and here was this picture of Munchie, and it just said Munchie on the front. I turned it over, and it said Myron Perpich. Perpich, there was a governor in Minnesota, Rudy Perpich. I wonder if he's related. Doesn't matter. But look at this guy. I could compare him in pictures to the other miners. His clothes were a little bit small, and it's like, this guy must be massive. Well, I'm going to paint this guy. So I cut him out, did all this, and I did it as a surprise to show them, Carrie mainly. I said, hey, look at this. And I made him 8 feet tall, because I knew wherever they'd be displaying him, that if I had him original size, it would look too small. And it was just a black and white picture, so that's what I made. It was black and white. And I did automotive, base coat, clear coat. It's funny because his wife told me, she says, I have to tell you a story. And it's about Munchie. I said, okay. And she said, it's funny how when Munchie came home from the service, a big guy, and everybody looked up to him, and I guess he would drink a little bit and he would fight a little bit, and they didn't want him in the Legion, so he was never a member. And now all these years later, he's what you look to when you come through the front door. It's a fantastic thing, and I thought, wow. And so I didn't realize how much he meant to the community, and it's just phenomenal.
If you have an idea for a common ground piece that pertains to North Central Minnesota, email us at legacy@lptv.org or call us 218-333-3022. To view any episode of Common Ground online, visit us at lptv.org. To order individual segments or entire episodes of Common Ground, please call 218-333-3020. Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people on the 4th of November, 2008.